Well, hello. My name's Jeff Vanderstelt. I am here in Bellevue, Washington. Excited to get to share some things with you about what I'm learning, as well as answer a lot of the questions that have been coming in. So we're going to do that in a few minutes. But just to let you know some things that we are working on at Saturate to better serve you. First of all, if you're not familiar with Saturate, Saturate provides both an online community through through Facebook, as well as a membership subscription through saturatetheworld.com, where you can get access to all kinds of resources, written, video, audio, access to print opportunities to see what new resources we're releasing. And so I just want to encourage you to check that out if you haven't yet. That also can give you opportunities to hear about new things that are coming up, connect to podcasts that we're producing regularly around key content, and know when webinar opportunities like this are coming up. So love to encourage you to look at becoming a member of saturatetheworld.com. Saturate the Sound is the thing we're doing locally as an expression of that, but saturatetheworld.com is a great way to get access to more of those resources. Second, I want to let you know that we just created a new resource, a Jonah study, where we look at how God is on mission and how we join him and are participating with him in that mission. Our last resource was the Ephesians study guide, and we've realized that for a lot of people, to help them get on mission, they're so used to doing a Bible study in a small group context that if we can take that same medium and then use it to direct them towards missional living together, it's a great bridge towards taking some of those next steps. And I know a lot of the questions that often come in is, how do we transition church people who are used to being in small groups, doing Bible studies together, towards a group of people that are on mission in everyday life? And the tools that we're creating in some ways are like a Trojan horse for that, to take something they're already familiar with, but then to begin to introduce the next steps of going on mission together. So I encourage you to take advantage of the Ephesians study if you haven't seen it yet, or the Jonah study that's just come out. Really, really great tools. We have several other tools like that we're trying to provide to support your work in discipleship in the local church. So hopefully those are serving you well. Please take advantage of them. Often at the beginning of this webinar, I will take time to share a little bit about what I'm learning, what I'm working through, because as many of you know, I'm a lead teaching pastor at Doxa Church in Bellevue. I'm doing the work that hope many of you are doing in the day-to-day, just trying to figure out not only how we do this in the church and lead God's people toward it, but how do I do this in my own home, my own neighborhood, with my kids, with their school. And it's not easy, and there's lots of challenges that we face all the time. And so I'm speaking out of that as a practitioner. So instead of telling you a lot about what I'm learning, as I look through a lot of the questions, a lot of what I'm going to learn, what I am learning, is going to show up as I walk through those questions. So I'm just going to start doing that. I know some of you are going to still want to bring questions to us, so feel free to do that. I'll be capturing questions along the way and try to do my best to answer as many as possible. So first of all, Jeff Peter asked the question, when we began planning a church in Vernon, BC, Canada, just over 4 years ago, that they did that 4 years ago, and things have been progressing more slowly than expected in regard to really implementing missional communities. And he wants to hear how that's been at Doxa. Many of you know that 5 years ago I stepped into this church that used to be the live preaching campus of Mars Hill in Bellevue, and where they captured video for the other campuses, and we replanted Doxa out of it 5 years ago. And the question is, how has that been? And I'll say it's, in a lot of ways, it's what I was expecting in terms of, I said it would take 5 to 7 years. We're going into year 6. Feels like we're just starting to get momentum, and so I'm encouraged. But I think I had a fairly realistic expectation that this would be hard and it would take time. Some things I didn't expect and I didn't see. I made some assumptions along the way that I now, if I could go back, would do differently. One of those assumptions is that I really believe that the people here were much more deeply formed in what it looks like to be with Jesus. With the way we just describe a disciple here, and this isn't new, we borrowed this from other people. Lots of people have said it this way. A disciple for us is someone who is committed to be with Jesus, become like Jesus, and do the things Jesus did. And I would say we started with the third part of that, do the things Jesus did, assuming that these are people who I thought already had that in place. And the reality is I think all of us need to always go back to the beginning. being with Jesus is the priority, and learning how to abide in him so that we would bear much fruit. And so right now we're spending this entire year just making that the theme of the year. We're working through the book of John. We are taking a quarter on each one of the practices that helps us be with Jesus. We're in silence and solitude right now, then prayer, then Sabbath, then Bible reading. And the reason why is because I know that if they don't have an abundance of affection for Christ, if they don't have a fullness of the Spirit, if they don't have his heart, then all we're doing is just calling them to a new legalism. And they'll be doing it in the power of the flesh, and it won't get anywhere. And so for us, we're taking this year to really emphasize that. Now, what's interesting, I'm already seeing a greater desire to push into the other things as a result of starting to spend more time with Jesus. And we'll see how it goes this year, but I trust Jesus' word is true, that when he said if we abide in him, we will bear much fruit. And so we just really assumed that they were abiding and didn't spend the time helping them to abide. So that's one of the things I'm learning. And when you talk about the question he asked is, how is replanting different from planting? I think in planting, you don't assume that. Or at least I didn't. When I was planting, I spent the first year with my core group working on all the basics before we went out effectively on mission. And in this case, I assumed that was already happening and then tried to get them on mission. And that was a big mistake I made. So I would do that differently. But the other thing that's hard about replanting, that's different than planting, is generally when people join a church plant, they join ideally with their eyes a little bit more open to the reality that they are going to go on mission with this new church and be more intentional than they might have been in the past. So they start out a little bit more like missionaries than they might have if they were already just attending a church that you're trying to change. So those are some of the changes. Jeff, I would just encourage you, really take the time to get to know where your people are at. Find out why it might be that they're moving slower than you thought. So much of discipleship is being with the people and getting to know their hearts and find out what the real issues are that are keeping them from moving forward. Blake says this. First of all, I'm a pastor leading our missional communities in the suburbs of Memphis. My wife and I are leading one of those as well. I would very much appreciate any thoughts around leading our people into everyday discipleship, specifically in the South, where a lot of people just call themselves Christians. As long as they show up on Sunday, check the box, they're good to go. Next level is that they're in a small group. So in this case, they join a missional community, check that box, but outside of weekly gatherings, there seems to be very little drive to be a Monday through Saturday missionary. We're seeing some movement in the right direction by inviting people into DNA groups, and if you're new to that, that's like a triad, 3 men or 3 women who are pressing in a lot more deeper to the heart in their discipleship. And so they're seeing more people coming into that, and by simply serving others outside of the gatherings to show them what it looks like. So we're not completely lost, but any thoughts around MCs in the South would be most helpful. Well, I have to be honest, I've never done that. So I'll tell you what I know of others have done that are part of the Soma family of churches that I interact with. I think for many of them, part of MC life together is to expose the fact that they have a cultural Christianity, not a deeply embedded walk with Jesus. In many cases aren't actually born again, don't have the life of the Spirit. And so I think what's helpful is a missional community can expose that. The way we talk about groups here is that Sunday gathering is where we, on a macro vision, call people to what it means to be a disciple of Jesus, so that they at least they're hearing about it regularly, they're being at least taught about it from the Word of God, having moments through our liturgy where they're experiencing, practicing it, including having communion together where they speak the truths of the gospel to each other. So that's limited, but it's a start. And Jesus had the crowds. He did that. And then the missional community for us is where they begin to practice the obedience to these commands that we are teaching on Sunday. And then the DNA group is where they're experiencing hopefully a deep personal transformation. And ideally, if the people in the DNA groups are part of the same missional community, then what's happening in the transformation gets to be expressed in the practice of a missional community together. And so connecting the dots between the 3 of those environments has been, I think, helpful for us to say, every time we're on Sunday, we should be thinking, especially those who are preaching, about saying, how are you going to live this in your missional community, and how might you discuss this in your DNA group? And the more those relationships are all connected, the harder it is to be kind of a cultural Christian who just checks the box and is never really known. And so you want to design your missional community environments and your DNA environments in such a way that eventually the true heart of a person is going to get revealed, so that they can see that they don't actually love Jesus potentially, or they don't know him as well as they thought, and they aren't working it out in everyday discipleship. So I think how you design the interactions in those environments is what's going to start to get to the heart, and nothing's going to change Monday through Saturday if the heart isn't exposed, if genuine repentance doesn't take place, and therefore transformation as a result is worked out. So I think making sure you're using those environments appropriately, trying to accomplish what you think they should accomplish, versus just plug and play. We've got these environments and we think that will do it alone. It won't. You've got to train people what to expect and what to do in each one of those environments. John Schroeder writes, what are your church's expectations regarding environments, time, capacity that leaders are asked to cultivate when asking to launch a new MC within your church? For example, a weekly meal, weekly DNA time, 1 hour on mission a week, 1 meal a month with a missional community member or family. What are some helpful ways to answer the statement, my family and my work are my mission, and I feel it should be organic or natural, not forced to be on mission? For us, I've had to adjust this over the years. In Tacoma, every culture is different. When I was in Tacoma, Washington, people love to live as much of their life within Tacoma. There's a sense that they want to make a bigger place feel small. And so there's a high value on local. Everything, let's buy local, let's support local, let's live local. So there was a lot of overlap of life. It was a lot easier to do everyday life together on mission. I'm now in a place, Bellevue, where people commute to work, commute to church events, commute to everything. Like they don't do much life near them, or they only do life by themselves near them. So they're excluded or isolated. So we've had to really adjust how we do things here, and we have a overly committed people, if I can be honest, especially to work and their kids' activities. And that may not be new for a lot of you, but that's very much true here. And so with that said, we've had to say we want minimally for you to commit to 2 activities a week: Sunday gathering, and then your missional community meal that many people are doing DNA groups within, or they do every other week of more focused DNA experience together. Now, I've had to settle with that. I'm not happy with that, but I've had to say that's where our people are at. We need to meet them where they're at, and then hopefully as they experience this kind of life together and they start praying for their friends who don't know Jesus, because I would affirm, yes, their family is their mission and their work is their mission, so that's not a bad thing. If they're using that as an excuse to actually not be on mission, that's a problem. In other words, if they don't care for any lost people at work, if they don't bring them into their life in terms of having meals together, maybe even inviting them to special events, then that's being used as an excuse. That's not actually something they truly believe. But if their family is their mission, then they're teaching their kids how to make disciples of their friends, engaging in their school life and sports life on mission with their kids, so their kids learn how to be missionaries. If their work is their mission, then it bleeds outside of just work, because it starts to go into meals together, lunchtime, before work, meeting together to have a coffee. So eventually that will look like a missional community life. The key is that they bring that world into their missional community, that they pray together for their friends at work. They pray together for their kids' friends. And so together they're praying for the lost. And over time, that will lead them to open doors to say, hey, these friends I've been praying for, I wanted to have them over for dinner. It'd be great if a few of you could join us so you can get to know them. Help me as I'm trying to reach them and share the gospel with them. So minimally for us, it's 2 times a week. And then we pray that will bleed in to the rest of the crevices and cracks of life. But we're not going to demand that, because then that becomes a form of legalism. And at some point, if they don't care for the lost, if they don't love Jesus, that's never going to work anyway. So we want that to be out of the overflow of their heart for Jesus and their love for one another. I'd encourage you to be careful how rigid you become. You want them to grow into this reality. And by the way to do that is to make sure the leaders of your church are ahead of them in that they're growing in it. So for instance, I have a missional community on Tuesday night. My DNA group meets on Thursday morning. Of course, I'm a part of every Sunday. And then I'm trying to encourage them to be involved in our mission together of reaching the high school that we're all involved in. And everyone in my missional community has their kids at the same high school. So it's a little bit easier to do that. So, because I'm leading that way, I can then call people to follow my example over time, but not say that the way I'm doing it is the only way to do it. And I think we just have to be really careful about that. Stephen says this: after leading missional communities for a while, what would you think the 4 topics or goals to cover in establishing a new MC? It's a really good question. I think, first of all, make sure they're established in the gospel, that they have a gospel foundation. I think that's the primary thing you have to start with. When we form new missional communities, one of the first things we do is we teach them what the gospel is. We talk about how to start to speak it to one another. And then we talk about how the gospel sets a paradigm for how we see all of life. So we kind of set that up in what we call our 301. And then many of our groups choose to, they aren't right now because we're focusing on silence and solitude, but many of them will choose to use the Gospel Fluency Handbook to go through. And I would, if you do that, by the way, I'd recommend you take your time in it. I think it's a lot of content. If you try to squeeze that into 8 weeks, it's too much, I think. I'd say try 12, 16 weeks or longer. But it's a really great tool to help people learn how to speak the gospel, learn how to live in light of the gospel. So that's one thing. The other thing we recommend at some point is something like the Saturate Field Guide, where they learn how their identity in Christ shapes their everyday living together on mission. So those are 2 things I recommend. I would say now, because of what we've learned, really helping form people in spiritual practices, making sure the group has at least gone through something like that together, so that hopefully they work that out personally, process that in their DNA group, but then get to talk about it at their MC. So if they haven't been formed in the basic practices of what it means to walk with Jesus, to be with him, then that's you have to do that, and don't assume that that's going to take place. So the gospel, spiritual formation practices, learn how to live that out in everyday life through the Saturate Field Guide. Those would be kind of the main things I would look at. And then probably 4th, they need to learn how to pray. They learn how to probably address spiritual warfare. We haven't actually done a lot of training on that. That's a weakness here, but that would be one I would like to see established and strengthened in our context.
Next week, we're just launching a podcast on how to start an MC for 8 weeks. So with that content.
Perfect. So Sonny just let me know next week we're actually launching a podcast on how to start an MC with the content that I just talked about. So super helpful if you want to check in on that. Dominic says, what are the first steps to make when you want to transition from Sunday to everyday? When I talk about missional community, often people don't understand the difference between the way they're doing church and missional community, in parentheses, life on life, versus just one-on-one discipleship, life with community versus just small group, life on mission versus just spending time in the community serving people. So in regard to this, do you have some things you feel it's good to say and others we shouldn't say when we train church leaders and members to be missional? Well, the first step in transitioning from Sunday to everyday is you always have to make sure the leaders, whatever your leadership structure is in your church, in our case it's elders, and then we have deacons we have paid staff who are deacons and elders. And for us, if they aren't living it out, if they aren't practicing it, if we aren't training them first, then we shouldn't expect it to bleed into the rest of the church. So start with the leadership that sets the culture, sets the pace, and it should be leading by example. If you haven't done that, back up the train, start with those people. Don't try to get everybody else in your church there until you start to get your leadership there. And then in terms of what is it good to say in terms of the difference between maybe the way that they did church or experienced church and the way missional community might look. Yeah, I think the best way to do this is just to take people back through the Gospels and to help them realize that, and even the book of Acts. And so whether that's you take them through a study or do a preaching series, or you just encourage them, hey, I want to encourage you to take a moment to read through one of the gospel narratives. And Luke might be the best because it's most detailed. So if you did Luke and then Acts, to just say, hey, when you look at that, how much of your life resembles what you see Jesus doing with the disciples? How much of our church resembles what we see the early church doing? I think the scriptures are enough. They're sufficient to help them see the difference from what probably the life is that they've been living and the life that we see displayed in Christ and the early church looks like. So that would be one thing. I think another thing that I often will do is I don't want to tear down anything in order to build up another. I think deconstruction can be very damaging. So instead, try to build on what is right and good of what already exists. So for instance, there's nothing wrong with a small group. That's a really good thing. Jesus had a small group. the question is, what does a small group do if we look at the life of Christ? And what would it look like if we started to do that together? And so one of the things I will often do with a small group when I'm consulting a church, even in our church here, with a small group that kind of has gotten stuck in the rut of just getting together with Christians or just studying the Bible but not doing anything about it, so I'll just ask them to change kind of the nature of the questions they're asking in their Bible study. So after they do their basic study of the text and try to figure out what it means and what it says, I want to ask them, well, if we believed what it means and what it says, what would we do? And maybe sometimes it's what would I do. There is personal application, but we don't tend to do this, and that is move it towards communal application. What would we do together this week or this month if we believed this was true and we were convicted we should live it? How are we going to do it? And let's not leave tonight until we clarify what we are going to do together as a community to obey this text this week or this month or this year. Second, what will we do with people who don't yet know Jesus? Because the biblical text is always missional. It was not meant to just create an isolated kind of people, a Christian cul-de-sac. It was meant to create a display people, a witnessing people that display as a city on a hill what it means to be a part of God's people. So what would we do together, and what will we do with people who don't know Jesus in light of this text this week, this month, this year? And so that helps move a people, just those questions. If you just kept asking those questions every single time a group got together, eventually it's going to turn that group toward each other in love and toward the world on mission. So those would be some ways to help them begin to do that. Rob says, can you give me practical ways to facilitate the necessary paradigm shift when transitioning a check the box for Sunday church to a saturating, and in his case he's in Dickinson, North Dakota, how do you transition it towards that saturating kind of mentality with the gospel everyday church? We still have small groups for some, the elderly family members, and are lacking in real missional community. Well, I think in some ways I answered it in the last one, so I think take that. The other thing I'd say, if you've got elderly people, there are lots of ways that you can call them on mission if they don't have the energy or the ability physically to join you in a lot of things. One of them is they pray. Call them to pray for the work that you're doing. Have them celebrate with you how God's answering those prayers. Some of those people love to exercise hospitality, like providing food for events, or just being at a place and being prayers at the event, maybe in another room. They're just praying together. Some of them love to watch and hold babies, so it's like give them a chance to just care for these kids while others are getting free to go have a conversation. So if you've got elderly members and it's a little more than what they can handle, they love being included in the game in ways that make sense for their present activity or energy level that they presently have. So that's some ways to do it. But I'd say in terms of small groups, transitioning them into real mission communities, some of the questions I just brought up I think could be really helpful. Bob talks about being in the process of transitioning a 180-year-old congregation into a missional community focus. They attended the Transitions Conference and have been working on this for a few years now. Some of the questions they have is our two new MCs. In their two new MCs, they have leaders who are both newer to the MC concept within the last couple of years. They're trying to figure out the best ways of coaching them. What would you suggest as materials, guidance for us to use in coaching them? One would be the podcast that we just mentioned. The other would be some of the materials I already talked about. The Saturate Field Guide could be really helpful. Especially that one I think could be helpful. The key about coaching is that it has a whole lot to do with caring, listening really, really well, trying to understand the things that are preventing them from working this out, whether that's ignorance, fear, insecurity. Every time I coach, I'm listening for kind of two categories. Is this a willing issue, or is this an able issue? Are they struggling because they don't want to, or the people in their group don't want to? Or are they struggling because they don't know how to? Like they really want to, but they just don't have the skills, they don't have the next steps, they don't have the tools. If it's a willing issue, then we're going to have to go after the heart. What's going on? Are there fears there? Are there insecurities? Is there idolatry? Are there past wounds they experienced? And so we want to do a good job of listening to discern what's going on. And if it's a willing issue, that's going to be a much more pastoral coaching session where I'm going to be drawing out the heart and helping them face the things either in them as leaders or that their group is struggling through, that I know the good news of the gospel can either bring healing to if it's a past wound, can give courage to if there's fear, can remind them of the love of God if there's a sense that they're going to fail or they've messed it up, and so there's shame, there's guilt. But I want to listen on that level to a willing. Is this a willing issue? Is this a heart issue that we want to get after? If it's more of a head or a hands issue, in other words, they don't know certain things, we want to teach them, or they don't know how to do certain things, so we want to give them skills, then I'm going to coach in a very different way. And some of that's going to lead them towards some reading they might have to do, or some things they might have to listen to, or some tools that I might have to train them in. And unfortunately, a lot of our training in the church is primarily didactic, where we teach them something, give them information, expect them to do it, and they've never seen it. They've never experienced it. They've never practiced it and have the opportunity to be given feedback. And so in a lot of cases, churches are calling their people to do something they've never seen, they've never experienced, they've never practiced, and they never had anybody give them feedback while they were practicing to really do what a real coach does, which isn't just listen to you without watching your life, but enter in and watch you play the game. And then as you're playing the game, help you see, oh yeah, there's something wrong with the way you're throwing the ball. Let me help you think through that. And so I would say if you have two missional communities and you're trying to coach them, one, do what I said earlier, pay attention, is this a willing or able issue? But two, ask yourself, have you been immersed in the context of what they're doing? Have you watched them in their missional community context to see if they're even able to lead people there? And have they ever seen anybody do it? So I think a while back, I did a training on deeper training, and that's just an acronym for whatever you do, it's got to be demonstrated, they've got to see it, it's got to be expounded, they've got to know it's coming from the Word of God. Experienced, you do it with them. Practice, they do it, and they have the repetition opportunity to get better at it. Exposure, which shows up when they practice, the things they can't do, the things they're afraid of, the things they don't know. And then reflect. You spend time with them reflecting on what that experience was like and how then they would repeat it to do it differently the next time. So hopefully that helps a little bit with that. The second question he asked is within our two MCs, they've asked about whether they can invite other members of our church into their MC. And in this case, I guess in the church you've said it's okay to invite not yet believers into the MC, but should we let people who haven't gone through some kind of training or development just jump into an MC? And in the past, we've said, don't just invite Christians into your MC, because a lot of times they'll try to take it and make it what they used to know at their previous experience, and that'll oftentimes steer it away from the course you were on. We still believe that can be the case. So what we do is we say, ideally, we want those people to at least gone through our discipleship pathway. For us, that's Doxa 101, 201, 301. But we also don't discourage them in the process of 301, which is toward the end, of getting into a missional community to start getting connected relationally while we're helping train them for what they should expect in that missional community together. So everyone's got to make that decision differently. In certain contexts, people aren't bringing maybe a bunch of their expectations of what the group should be. I'd say the more that people are doing that, the more they need to have a little bit of preparation so they don't go into the group and try to steer it in a direction it's not meant to go. Cameron zooms out a bit and is talking about how in their context they've been working towards a kind of a gospel saturation, unified work in their region, which is super exciting. I love hearing that. We're doing that as well here in Saturate the Sound, and he listened to our another podcast I was on with Exponential last week about how we're seeing city movements take place. He asked this question: what does it look like or sound like at ground floor as you begin piecing together Saturate the Sound? They already have a bunch of relational credibility, so I shared with the group last week that we had to spend a lot of time just building a relationship. Sounds like they've already got that, which is great, and doing some really good things together. I would say and then he goes on to say, was it vision that connected the dots for other pastors in the Sound? Was it prayer? Was it missional engagement? Was it, all the above? And the Spirit, of course, breathing on it. And I'd say the key for us was that we weren't just committed to unity. We were committed to a strategy of gospel saturation that had real teeth. And it really would call you to commit. And the commitment, and in his case, he said that they may not need more church plants in their region. And I think I would go probably towards something like what we did, even though we do need more church plants where I live. But one of the measurables was we want to see one gospel community on mission. So that's a small group of people loving one another like a family, looking for tangible ways to serve in their community so that they might be a witness to Jesus, missionaries who share the gospel together. So we're aiming for one missional community or one gospel community on mission per 1,000 people in our region. So we have about 4 million in the Puget Sound. That's 4,000 gospel communities on mission, and we've identified 4 categories where we live, work, learn, and play. Our long-term desire is to be able to say every neighborhood has a gospel community on mission, every school per 1,000, there's 4,000 there, we need 4 of them there. Every workplace has that, so Microsoft, 70,000 employees, we got 70, we got to get started there at some point. And then every recreational place where we play. So sports all the way up to professional will have a gospel presence where we're at. So I think that's something that's transferable to any place, to say let's pray that God would help us together, which that's going to require unity, because if all of a sudden you have people living in one neighborhood from 2 or 3 different churches now working together so you can have one group reaching that neighborhood together is going to require 3 churches working together in true unity. And so I'd say that's a way you can begin to do it. I think if you don't have a strategy, if you don't have measurable outcomes, then what you do is you get together and pray, and you fast, and you have unity, and you build trust, and all that's great, but that's not going to lead to a transformation of your context together. The second part of that is we didn't just have pastors come together to do this. We asked for their leadership of the whole church to commit together to this vision, instead of it being just a kind of a pastor's huddle, which oftentimes that's what happens. And so the church isn't really a part of it, but the pastors are all doing it. Getting the whole church to be a part of it is a big deal. And so we just had a Unite the City event where we had all these pastors who are learning cohorts together so that they can lead their people to be disciples and make disciples, so that eventually we have gospel communities on mission, so that eventually we have gospel saturation. All of those pastors, we encourage them to invite their church to come for this night of worship, prayer, vision casting, and commitment to see themselves in everyday life be a part of this vision as well. So that would be how I would recommend it, and that it doesn't require church planning if you don't need more churches, but it does require collaboration, it requires equipping, it requires a vision with a strategy to really move toward that. All right, I think we've had some more questions come in. Mitchell asked this question: what do you think about a married couple where both are faithful, growing disciples, but the wife is a good fit to be an MC leader, but the husband is not? Well, for us, in our context, we don't encourage missional communities to be led by just one person. We encourage a team. And we've got a few situations where I can see the wife might be stronger than the guy. And so we just say, like, okay, how can you still be a team? Maybe she's going to take a role that looks a whole lot more like a leader than he will. What's his role? What's his gift? How does he serve? And then we wouldn't just say have a couple lead one anyway. We'd want to have 1 or 2 other people come alongside of them. Ideally, I like to see at least 3 people if we can. Now, we're not living the ideal. I just want to uphold, have a standard I'd like to live toward. And if you like Ephesians 4, apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, teacher, equipper kind of a way of thinking, then I would say ideally I like to see a teacher in there so that we stay true to the word, a shepherd so we're caring for people really well, and an evangelist who continues to remind us we need to reach the lost. The apostle, prophet are great, but I think a lot of times they serve at a higher level because they're thinking about how do we help everybody get out. How do we keep ourselves faithful to God's word? How do we push people to do justice and mercy? A lot of times those people can serve the larger group of missional communities, but those 3 in there I think can be really helpful. If you don't like APAST, then I'd say make sure you have a Bible person in there. Make sure you have a relational person in there. Make sure you have someone who can think, how do we move this out structurally with strategy? So in that case, maybe the husband doesn't fit any of those, and that's fine. But I do think there's a warning there that you don't bring a division between the couple in terms of she's always called into something. And I would say this for a guy, too. I get concerned with guys always getting called into leadership. Their wives are not included. That's not helpful either. So somehow you just have to be really sensitive to how much you're calling somebody into meetings and strategy and all that, especially if you're talking about a husband or a wife meeting with other men or women to plan out what's going to happen in the group. You just have to be really wise about the relational nature of those meetings together. So I think if you're married, it's ideal if you include them in somehow so they don't feel left out. And potentially the evil one can get in there and bring division as well. So you have to be really careful about that. Mark Jones says, for our first MC, should we prioritize inviting unchurched people who could become new MC leaders? Can pastoral care hinder multiplication? Oh, you're asking 3 questions. How can we be intentional without showing favoritism? I think inviting unchurched people in, don't if you think of them as a project, you're going to get in trouble. So be careful about that. Like, oh, these are going to be our new leaders. We have to trust the Lord to bring the people and show us who those leaders might be. More than anything, an MC should prioritize inviting unchurched people into their life, and I mean, if they don't, we're not on mission. So absolutely, but I wouldn't have in your mind, are these people going to be our next leaders? I think if you're not careful, you will unhelpfully project a project mentality that you're trying to build your thing with people. And I just say, like, be committed to make disciples. It's likely some of them will become leaders, but you have to be really careful about having that mentality too strongly in the back of your mind when you start. Be praying. Our team prays at 10:02 ideally every day. Luke 10:2. Look to the harvest. Jesus says it's plentiful. Pray to the Lord of the harvest to send workers. I think continue to pray for that. In our missional communities, we do eventually want to identify an apprentice or apprentice team that we know we can send out to start a new missional community, but we have to be really careful to not too quickly try to identify that too soon, because you just got to take time with people and let them grow and see where they land. So I would say just be careful about that in terms of it being too much on your agenda. It is important, but don't make people a project in the process. Can pastoral care hinder multiplication? No, absolutely not. I think without pastoral care, you won't have multiplication because you can multiply a lot of unhealthy people. And that is the sure way to destroy the whole thing. So I think pastoral care is absolutely imperative to raise up healthy leaders. I think if you're not careful, if you only let shepherds kind of lead everything, they will, if they're not careful, hold everything back from growing or multiplying, because their bent is to bring people together and care deeply for them. So you've got to find that balance of shepherds caring well for people while teachers are making sure they're growing in their understanding of the word, evangelists are helping them reach the lost, and apostolic leadership or prophetic leadership is helping them think outward for the sake of the advancement of the church. So you just can't have it only led by pastoral care. But if you don't have pastoral care, it's going to get you eventually in ways that you're going to regret. And then how can we be intentional without showing favoritism? To me, I don't think Jesus, well, let me back up. We have to qualify what is favoritism. Clearly in the church, we're not supposed to show favoritism in terms of how we extend grace, how we open the kingdom of God to everyone. There's that reality. But Jesus clearly did pour into a few. And he had his, Peter, James, and John. And of course, John in his own gospel says, I'm the disciple Jesus loved. So there was something there that was closer. And so I don't think it's wrong to have people that are closer than others. I don't think it's wrong to invest more time into others. You can't actually do discipleship unless you make those decisions. So if you try to do it with everybody, you won't. So I think you have to pray. Jesus spent a whole night in praying about the 12 who would be apostles. I think we have to pray and say, Lord, who are you calling me to invest more time into? And there's an old acronym some people use that's FATR, fatter. Probably not helpful, but faithful, available, teachable, responsive. That's generally what I'm looking for when I'm going to decide who I'm going to spend more time in. Are they faithful? Do they show up? Do they do what they say? Available, can they make time in their life for this? Teachable, are they humble enough to acknowledge that they don't know it all? Responsive, when I correct them, do they have a repentant heart and a humility in how they work through that? So I'm looking for those people, and then I'll spend more time with them. So you have to do some of that, otherwise you're never going to really make disciples. Caleb asked, can you share a bit more about the assimilation process you have for people 101, 201, and 301? Sonny's going to post a link to our Doxa Connect web page so you can see how that works. It's also on we use the pilot guide as well to do that. You'll see that we created videos to support it. We've uniquely designed it for our context. For us, 101 happens right after a Sunday gathering once a month. We have a meal together. Elders are sitting at tables according to region. Staff are in the room. So it gives everyone a chance to meet our church. I share the vision, the mission, the theological distinctives, and what it means to be a member here. We open it up for questions. Then we let them know the next step for them if they want to keep moving forward is 201, where we're going to explain more in depth about what a disciple looks like and how we work on helping them become a disciple who makes disciples at Doxa. That's a 2-week. It used to be 3 weeks. We've shrunk it down to 2. During our Sunday morning gathering at 9, we have 2 gatherings, so they can pick the 9 to go to and then attend the 11. It's kind of like a Sunday school class in some ways, but we put them together in their region. They get to know people along the way. Our hope is to connect them and have our leaders get to know them better. Then 301 is 4 weeks on a Sunday night. They have a meal. They're ordered into their region, where they're from geographically. We go through week 1's the gospel and how to tell your story making Jesus the hero. We let them know they're going to do that in triads, DNA groups, over the next 3 weeks, of which they've been assigned into a triad by that night. The second week is spiritual formation, have them do an assessment. This is new. We're just trying a new way of doing this right now. And then help them understand how they can grow in their own spiritual formation through the practices. Third week is around how they work out DNA and gospel to the heart, and we'll do a fishbowl exercise, and then they have to practice it themselves. And then the fourth week is what is a missional community, and how do you begin to work out living life together as a loving family on mission together. And then hopefully out of that, they either formed a missional community or we already plugged them into one, and that training got them ready to be fully involved in one. So that's what our process looks like. I would say if you don't have some form of a discipleship pathway, and we know it doesn't complete the discipleship process, it just gets them on the path. If you don't have something like that, you might want to think about how to build something like that in your own church. Mitchell asked, how long do you see DNA groups stay together before they're able to lead their own? The DNA group for us, at least in our context, I know there's others who they look at DNA as a multiplication thing. It's the one thing I don't push hard on in terms of multiplication, because it's kind of the one environment where you're hopefully getting connected with people who you're going to go pretty deep with and you're going to go pretty vulnerable with. And if you always know that those things are going to get restarted over and over again, you're probably going to limit how close you're going to get. And so in some cases, we're just not pushing that to kind of keep multiplying out. Again, some of what I see in the life of Jesus is he had his 3, Peter, James, and John, and there was a uniqueness that they had that was really close. And you could say, well, when he left, they did that with others, and that's very likely the case, but that's still 3 years, 3.5 years or so. And so those are going to be our most long-term relationships. I'm not looking for those to multiply as quickly. However, like I've been in a situation where I've gone and helped people start a missional community or start a DNA group, and I might sit in that to help them learn for a bit. But for us, those are there's kind of an unending timeline on that. We're not going to push people to start new ones. Sometimes they naturally do because people move away or they join a new missional community and they find themselves getting connected to new people. But that's the one thing I'm not going to push multiplication on nearly as fast. Brennan asked, what have been some things that have worked well in DNA groups? What are some things you wish you would love to do differently given the chance? For us, we just didn't build a training pathway to help them really know how to do it well. We didn't carefully help people get in them. I think in some cases, people just felt obligated to be in a DNA group because they were in the same missional community together, but they got into DNA groups with people that were not emotionally healthy, and it led to some emotional abuse. And so I think I'm more protective of them now than I used to be. And so one of the things when I interact in my coaching with a group that's trying to figure out DNA groups, I always say, don't go into a DNA group with people you don't feel healthy with, you don't feel safe with, And unfortunately, like now when we start them, they start out with some people, and we give them an 8-week trial to see if they feel that. But we let them know if it doesn't feel healthy, if it doesn't feel safe, it's not something you feel you have chemistry in, it's okay to bow out of it and try another. So for me, it's chemistry, do you feel safe, are these people you're going to actually share your life with. Because if you don't have that, it's not going to go anywhere. It's just going to become another Bible study where you aren't honest and real and transparent with each other. So that's a big part. And then I think providing more specific tools, like here's a guide to work through, here's a discussion to have, here's a practice to experience. I think this is the one area that people are most ill-equipped in, and most damage can be done in if you put unhealthy, unsafe people in. So making them safe, healthy people with the ability to like have some training, some guide that helps them with it is something that we're doing differently now. We're also realizing this may be the most important relationship they have in the church, so we have to be even more intentional than we ever were before. I think we saw this as like, once they get into mission communities, then we'll do this. Now we're beginning to say like, no, as soon as we can, we got to help them get into these kinds of safe, healthy, disciple-making environments. And then you might ask the question, because it might come to your mind as I'm talking, what do you do with people who aren't healthy, who aren't safe? That's where we have a thing called journey groups. It's a 8 to 10 week long process of going at deeper issues that are keeping you from probably moving forward in healthy ways. And if that doesn't help you get to a place where you can be in a DNA group, we would probably recommend professional counseling and not just put people into these groups if they're not healthy and safe. Stephen says, as the lead pastor, lead MC leader, so I'm a lead teaching pastor and I'm an MC leader. I think that's what he's asking. How do you apply the passage, submit to one another? How do you yield to others as Jesus taught us and still continue to share and live out the vision? So I'm not sure if you're asking this question this way, but I'll frame it this way in case it is. I think a lot of times lead pastors or people in position of authority over other people ask, who can I be honest with? Who can I be vulnerable with? Or who can confront me? And I think it's a false dichotomy that we've created, unfortunately, in the church, that somehow I, as a lead pastor, have some kind of a unique card that I get to pull and say, I don't have to submit to everybody like you do. And so I just, for me, all my DNA guys, they get to confront me in my sin. My mission community can call me out when they see me not handling myself in ways that are godly. I think it's, by the way, whoever has the highest perceived authority and power has to be the first to make themselves the lowest and weakest. This is the example of Jesus, like Philippians 2. Like he had all of it, and he became the lowest and below everyone in his posture of servanthood. And we as people in positions of power and authority, we can either wield it and use it to control and to protect ourselves, or we can be willing to lay it down and humble ourselves. And I know that's a huge risk. You don't do this with everybody, of course, but you do need to do this with some people. Otherwise, you can never call people to follow your example. And then I happen to have a very good body of elders that are very healthy, care for my soul really well, have no problem confronting me in my sin. And some of that, I have to be honest, is like, as a lead pastor, you have to create that culture. You have to want that. And then you have to tell people you need it. And then you have to show that you will do it when they confront you. So I think a lot of it's there. You know, even in my marriage, I need to model it there. That even though I believe the scriptures are clear that my wife Janie submits to me as the head, as the church submits to Christ, I also, if I read backwards a little bit in Ephesians, have to submit to her as my sister. And so sometimes she's my sister, and she's going to call me to account on things that are broken in me, and I don't get to pull a card like, well, I'm the husband, so you have to submit to me. I have to go, no, she can pull the card, I'm your sister, and you have to submit to me. And so having that mutual submission as brothers and sisters, and sometimes learning what's the role that we're in, is really important. So yeah, as I lead the church, people are called to submit to me as a leader. But as a brother, I'm called to submit to them as brothers and sisters. And so we've got to know when to step into those roles appropriately. And I think a big part of that is always going to come to whoever has the most authority and power sets the culture of submission in the church to one another. From Cedar Hills Community Church, what is the greatest fruit you've seen in the history of Saturate and missional community groups? I think it's hard to say this because anytime you say it, you have to like credit everybody else that's influenced us. So it's not just saturate. But I think the heart around gospel fluency, in terms of that Jesus is better than anything else, and the truths of Jesus apply to everything. And there's no way I could say that's saturate. That's like the Spirit of God working through all kinds of people, whether it's Tim Keller or Matt Chandler or Gospel Coalition or Graham Goldsworthy. I mean, we could just keep going on and on. All the people God's used to raise that water line of gospel saturation. So I'd say that's one, but there's no way we can take credit for that. The second is everyday discipleship. And I won't take credit for that because lots of other people have done that, but I do think that's a thing that we beat the drum on a lot, that not only is Jesus better, but the church is more than just Sunday, and the mission is every day. And so this idea of everyday discipleship, the priesthood of the saints, re-embracing in a lot of ways how everyday normal people are the church in everyday life, doing the work of Jesus in everyday ways. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that at least we're trying to make a commitment to, and hopefully that's made an impact. In terms of missional community groups, I think there it's like the beauty there is that if you do them well and if people live it out, church just got smaller, and church just got more like accessible. Like everybody gets to play, everybody has a part, everyone has a role, and that's back to the priesthood of the saints reality and everyday discipleship. And I think if we live this out well, it makes it so that the church looks a whole lot more like what we see Jesus doing and what the Acts account shows the church did as a result of it. So hopefully that's what we've done. I don't know. I mean, it's like there's probably 1,000 people are all saying we all did that. And I think that's what just hopefully we're joining with what the Spirit is doing around the country, around the world. Brennan asked the question, how important do you feel the content is if we keep having people who are not yet believers join in our missional community time each week? Well, that for us, this is why we continue to tell our missional communities, first of all, you leave the 99 for the lost sheep. So you let the youngest member set the agenda, at least for the time together around the meal. And then for us, DNA groups is where we're going to go deeper. We're going to do more study, where that's a protected group. We're not inviting people into that one. And then I know some of our groups will say, hey, for a season, let's not invite anybody and let's press into each other a little bit here and really make sure we're all being developed well. And then, let's open it up and invite. Others have said, hey, this night, our family meal for a season, let's not invite people to that, but let's invite people to the parties that we're going to throw. And so every group is a little different depending on what phase they're in, what they're trying to accomplish. We have others who say, hey, once a month, that's the time we invite everybody. And then the other time, I know some groups who just go, in one of the churches that we had the privilege of joining in and helping plant, they basically take 4 weeks of a month and go, okay, one night is invite everyone to the party, another is a family meal with just us, another is a night of prayer, and then this one is a night where we're going to go out and talk about how do we serve people in unique ways that week. And so they break it up that way. So I think it's going to depend on your context, the people you have. You do need to have some space where it's not always just people coming in. Jesus got his disciples away and then debrief what just happened. He had those moments with just them. And I think you've got to find those spaces if you don't have them. And from that continued question from Brennan, you also asked, what functionally do we do together? Is eating, talking, just relating enough? That's, again, going to depend on the stage of your group, what you need to accomplish. For me in our group right now, the season we're in, because most of them don't know how to do silence and solitude. So we're spending 1 quarter just focusing on that. So what we're doing in our missional community weekly meal is we come together, we eat, then we get together and we share how our experience has been, broadly, not really intimately, because we do that in our DNA groups, around silence and solitude. Then we're doing a bit of a kind of a discussion around what we're going to do this next week, maybe a little study from a passage of Scripture, and then saying, how are we all going to practice that this week? Let's ask each other how it went. And then we stop and take time to pray for each other's unique needs. That's what we're doing right now. What we were doing was we had a meal, we'd get together, we'd say, how can we pray for each other? If there are non-believing friends we want to see come to faith, we'd name them in prayer and pray for for the Spirit to help us, and then say, what can we do together this week to help each other on their mission? If we have non-believers come, it's probably going to be a meal, and at some point, one of our hopes would be is that we find out their story, that we might, have a few people say, hey, tell us about where you're from. How you moved into the new area. It's great to meet you. Tell us about, your family. And we're hoping that we get to know their story. And then that sets an opportunity to maybe them say, hey, well, tell me about you. And now we tell our story. And so those are some things we're trying to do as a way of introducing them to Jesus, because we train everybody at Doxa how to share their story, making Jesus the hero. So it becomes a great open door for hopefully evangelism to happen. And then one last one I've got here is, do you take any attendance in your MCs? If so, how? We don't, but we do ask our MC leaders to fill out a status report regularly of who is in their group, who is new in their group, who's an apprentice, who's sharing leadership, what roles, and even how many kids are in the group. So we do that, and I think it's like quarterly we do that. We used to do that monthly, but I think it was a little arduous for some of our leaders. So we don't take attendance as much as we just want to know who's involved, and the coaches. And we have a coach overseeing usually 3 missional communities, maybe 4, and it's their job to know what's going on in the life of every missional community. And if there's members struggling or people no longer showing up, or a unique situation they need to step in and help, then they're aware of it that way. And all of our coaches meet with our missional community leaders one time a month in a formal coaching time that we have here at the building. We have a meal together. There might be a piece of vision that we share, and maybe one small piece of training if they need it. And then the rest of the time is in coaching clusters, coaching cohorts, where a missional community coach or coaches will coach a group of missional community leaders together, so they're learning from each other in that coaching environment. And then the responsibility of that coach is to have one other touch point that month with their missional community leaders. So that can be a phone call, it could be a coffee, whatever, but they got to have a touch point with them to check in one more time. And that's to follow up on what you just talked about in the coaching cohort, to see if they're doing it. And then ideally there's one visit. I think it's a quarter or every 6 months. I'm not sure what it is right now, but one visit that they actually go to the missional community and see what's going on the ground. So that's kind of how we keep track of what's actually going on. So attendance isn't as important to us as involvement and then healthy engagement. So those are things that we're aiming for. All right, I think that's all the questions I have. I hope this was helpful. It's always a good opportunity for me. I always count this a privilege to share, hopefully humbly, from my own brokenness and challenges, what we're learning. And we're learning. We're with you guys. This is no easy task. With the help of the Spirit, we're moving forward. But I'm in this with you all. Wish I could see you all. Hope this was helpful. It's good to be with you. Again, if you want more help, I really strongly encourage you to subscribe to the different resources we have. You can do that at saturatetheworld.com. There's so much help. In fact, almost every question I've answered has been answered many, many times from different people in different contexts. There's also a ton of resources to serve you. And some of you might need coaching, like you might need more specific walking through your unique situation. And we provide that if you're interested in that. We'd love to serve you in that as well. Again, thanks for being with us. Hope you have a great day.